I'm pressing record and we're ready to begin. So once again, welcome to our coffee hour this morning. This morning, Miss Grace and I have prepared a little presentation, and we hope it's more of a reminder, but for some people it might be new, and it's about standards-based learning. You'll learn all about standard-based learning that we have here at ACS.
So before we actually get into the standard base, I think we need to go over what the mission, the vision, and the core values of ACS are. And they're really nicely put on the slide. I love the picture. It's just all of the elementary kids in different colors. It's beautiful. So why standards-based is so important to us is because, as our mission says, we challenge and inspire students to be critical thinkers, lifelong learners, responsible world citizens through a comprehensive English-based education. Sounds like a lot of words, but in the end, it's really having a goal and a target that we teach our kids around. And these are our goals and targets. And that's almost like a standard for how we teach at ACS. The vision, simple, a model of excellence in educating students. And the core values, I think we know a lot more because our kids hear them a lot more. Founded in integrity, committed to diversity, and focused on excellence.
So we wanted to begin with a little saying that we like. And it's a little bit maybe of a challenge for you to think about how has the world of the child change in the last 150 years? And of course, the answer is it's hard to imagine in a way that it hasn't changed. They're immersed in all kinds of stuff that was unheard of 150 years ago. And yet, if you look at schools today versus 100 years ago, they are more similar than dissimilar. And that's from Peter. And his last name, I always pronounce it wrong. I believe it's Senge, right?
Yes.
And we have a little picture here for you to see. Schools, the top one is a school room 150 years ago or 100 years ago. And then we have a room, pretty recent room, might even look like one of our classrooms.
Yeah.
And we don't see that much difference physically in the room, do we?
At the same time, when we look at these classrooms, it's an idea. It gives you an idea to compare what hasn't changed. And standards-based is something that we're going to talk about that luckily we've had even through COVID, because it gives us something to focus on. Just like the teaching in these classrooms is something we're focusing on rather than just only the physical aspect of it. It's who's up there and what are we doing in the classroom.
So standard-based learning, what is it? By the end of this meeting, what you will be able to understand is what is standards-based learning, what is the role of assessment in standard-based learning, the role of feedback in standards-based learning, how grades are determined both in elementary and in secondary, and how standards-based learning sets up students for success. So let's dive in.
So this slide talks to us a little bit about what standards-based learning is. It includes the assessment, it includes the grading, it includes a lot of different parts. But the most important thing is that we're looking at standards as our targets. And that target, you can use it and be flexible in how you instruct your class, how you plan for your instruction, and what assessments you actually are using. We're going to talk more about assessment later on, but the standards are what drive everything around them and also makes it flexible for teachers to be able to address students individually or as groups or even by topics and themes.
So traditional teaching, probably the teaching that you received and I received and Miss Grace received, was teacher-centered. The teacher was in front of the room. The teacher did all the talking and the students sat quietly. That was something that was aimed for students just to be quiet and just to receive information that was given only by the teacher. There was always facts to be learned and memorized. You always had paper pencil assessments. Mainly they were just individual assessments. And of course, like I said, limited student talk. Student talking was not something that teachers wanted back in the day. But now standard-based teaching is student-centered. Oops, sorry about that. Just jumped ahead. Now, how do I go back? Give me 1 second. Here we go. Standards-based is definitely more student-centered. I'm not going to say that there's not teacher talking. Of course, there always is, but it's much more limited. Knowledge, skills, and understandings and dispositions standards are to be learned. So there's not only academic standards, there's also disposition standards, understanding standards. There's a variety of assessments. There might be paper pencil, but there might be oral assessments. There might be project assessments, group assessments. A lot of times kids can choose how they want to demonstrate their learning. There's much more collaboration in what we have the kids do nowadays, as well as some individual. And of course, a lot of student talking and questioning is the aim to check their understanding.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about assessment. And in the next slide is more or less like a definition of what assessment is. Apart from this definition, I'd like to talk a little bit, my analogy that I love the best is swimming in the pool. And what the assessment is. There are two kinds of assessment when you're learning to swim. Now, you can throw a kid over the deep end and he will swim the first day. And you get, wow, he knew how to swim. But usually we need to practice, okay? So the practice is like a formative assessment. The summative is like going to the Olympics or taking part in a competition. The analysis and the collection of data is all of that formative. If you're not doing the practice, then you don't know what your time is like. You don't know if your stroke is fine. You don't know if you're going to drown. There are a lot of parts of swimming that are formative to be able to get to the summative. And there, like I said, there are the lucky ones that can jump off the deep end and swim. That doesn't happen to all of us. But the way that standard base is made up is that we can catch those kids that can jump in the pool and swim the very first day. And we can work with the kids who need more formative practice before becoming proficient at being able to get into the pool and swim to the other side.
So in standard-based assessment, as Grace was saying, we use it to improve student learning. So we see teachers analyze and observe students, and they individually see what is it that they need. What are their needs? What are their strengths? Like Grace said, maybe they're already swimming. And so, okay, let's perfect their swimming. Let's teach them the backstroke. But some of them are barely keeping their head above water. So we meet them where they are. While we're measuring student learning, it's important that through that formative assessment, we understand where our students are. The teachers understand and the students understand where they are. It's very important that both student and teachers, of course, and parents know exactly where they are during formative assessment and what they can do to improve. Assessment for learning is the formative assessment, right? So where are you? What can you do to improve? How am I going to help you? What do you have to do? That's all formative. But the assessment of the learning That's the summative assessment. As you see in the picture, someone going up the ladder at the beginning, that's formative assessment. Is the ladder placed properly? It's not going to move to one side or the other. What do I have to do? Do I have to balance my body more? Do I have to pull out the ladder a little bit further from the wall? I keep going up. It's formative and formative until I get to the top of the roof, top of the ladder. That's the summative assessment. I finally got to the top.
This is another analogy.
One of my favorites, I have to say, about the cook.
About the cook, with the formative and the summative. And it's kind of like the pool, right? You try a new recipe, or you make your own recipe. You're the cook, you're the inventor of that recipe. And every time you try it, you make your pizza dough or your tomato sauce or whatever, you add something, you take away something, you're trying it continuously to see if it's good. And those are your formatives. They're very, very important, because very few of us will make that dough the first time, or the tomato sauce, and it's perfect. No, we need to try it. We need to add more oregano, more basil, whatever it is that we do. And at the end, the guests are the ones who tell us what that was like. So our soup was wonderful. Our pizza was wonderful. That is the summative test. But you can't get there if you don't go through the formative stages. Very few of us have that ability.
Right. And if I could just say something too, like Grace was saying, when you're testing your pizza dough or your tomato sauce or your soup, right, that guides you to whether you have to, like she said, add more basil, or you need a little more salt, or whatever it is that you need. That's the guiding. Just like for teachers, the formatives guides their instruction. Oh, I see. This child needs a little bit more of this for me to do with them tomorrow. This group needs a little more of this. Everyone might need something different, and that's okay. That's what teachers do.
And at the same time, when you're talking about formatives, just to add to what Maria was saying, is that it's also unfair if you're learning to make dough or tomato sauce or soup, that every time you do it, the chef comes and gives you a grade on it. No, because you're learning, you're adding, you're experimenting. Yes, you want their feedback, but you don't want it to be, oh, I'm learning this thing. I'm drowning in the pool and they're giving me a 0, but I'm trying my best. So you need those formatives to help you self-evaluate as well and get feedback from everyone around you before you actually do the summative.
Right. That formative assessment, like it says here, is what determines where each learner, every student is in relationship to the standard. So that's why it's so important, these formative assessments for students to do, even though they're not getting graded on it, but or else how will they or the teachers know where they're at? What the teacher can do to help guide them and pull them up in order to reach the standard. That formative assessment is used to provide feedback. We always are talking with teachers, and teachers are giving timely and constructive feedback. And that's what the formative assessment do. The formative is actually the feedback for them. Like I said, it furthers their instruction to help move students forward. And formative assessment has to happen frequently and informally, so that it helps guide the instruction. And it's, like we said, it's not part of the grade, but it is connected to the summative grade. Because if there's not enough practice in the pool at the end, when you have the swim meet, you might not do as well because you didn't practice enough in the pool before the competition.
So adding on to what Maria just said, it's the practice of our formatives that make the summatives successful. It is that practice of formatives that provides feedback to the students, that gives them chance over chance, again, to practice whatever they need to practice to perfect what they're learning. we use the summatives for many different reasons. It aims, as it says here, to evaluate student learning and academic achievement at the end of a chapter, at the end in the midterm, at the end of a semester. APs, for example, is a summative assessment. It's at the end of the year. It compares students against their class, right? Or against all American schools, or against some kind of universal standard or benchmark. And the benchmark itself, under the standards, that already is something to compare against. I want to say that students who have done their formatives, I know a lot of times they figure, it's kind of like a reward. If I'm not getting a reward, a grade for it, then I don't think it's important. But it's also teaching that there are many things in life that we don't get rewarded for until we are good at it, until we've learned how to do it. And so it's the same thing as the cook versus the chef or the swimming competition. Learning to swim versus really going to a swim meet. And the summative is always at the end. Now, you can mess up in a summative. That's okay. If you're a teacher, or you're the coach of the swimming team, or the chef who's seen you progress, with your soup or your pizza, then that something happened that day that wasn't right. It happens to all of us. We all have a bad day, or something went wrong. But because you've done all these formatives, and because you've done all of these benchmarks in your progress to that standard, then what happens is that we give you a retake. We say, let's see what happened. Maybe the form of the assessment wasn't good for you. Maybe we need to just have you relax. You're having a bad morning. So there's so much flexibility in the summative and formative formation to take the assessment.
We're going to talk a little bit again about evaluation, how it has evolved. Traditionally, when you and I went to school, like we said, they were mainly written tests. Students didn't always know what was going to be on the test. And it was always at the end of a unit. Lots and lots of information that had to be memorized and had to be remembered from the beginning of the semester until the end of the semester. But now in standard-based learning, there's a variety of ways for students to demonstrate understanding. And a lot of times teachers will give choice to students in how they would like to demonstrate understanding. Students know in advance what these standards they're going to be graded are, what the criteria is, what they need in order to be successful in the assessment. And we use assessment before, during, and after units, not only after. As we go into units, we want to know what students already know, what they need more help on. During the unit, those are our formatives. What's happening? What do I need to help you on? What do we need to review more before the summative assessment? So it's much more fluid now when we give assessments during standard-based learning.
When we talk about assessments, more than anything else, the teachers are working together with the kids. So if I am doing something in class and I know that the end goal is this standard, usually what's done, and it's not always a rubric, but it's explained to you what you will be doing and what that looks like. So I can actually go in there and say, I want to get a 4 out of 4. So this is what it looks like if I want that grade. I need to have turned in my project on time, finished my draft by these days, have so many paragraphs in my presentation. This is what my presentation must have in it. It's all there. And you're working side by side with the teacher to demonstrate how you understand. And maybe when you start off with that one project, you might not get more than a 1 out of 4 because you are progressing towards your 4 out of 4. And you're choosing where it is you want to fall on that grading system. You know how far you are from the 4/4 if that is your goal. You know how far you are or what you need to get done if you want the 3/4. And you know what you need to get done because it's all lined out there as benchmarks for you to achieve as you do the formatives before your summative.
We're going to talk a little bit now about the role of feedback. We have another quote here from John Hattie, who is the guru of standard-based learning and everything that has to do with assessment and feedback. And he says, if there's one systematic thing, excuse me, that we can do in schools that makes a difference to kids' learnings, it's the notion of feedback. He believes that it's the most significant thing that teachers can do that singularly changes achievement. That's pretty profound. They're saying that, of course, that feedback can change everything, not really how a teacher is teaching you or what the subject is or how much time you spent on something, but it's the actual feedback on what the child did so they clearly understand what needs to change in order to improve is what will change achievement. If we go back to Miss Grace's pool analogy, what a coach standing on the sidelines of somebody practicing in the pool, how effective will it be if the coach is always quiet, not saying anything to the swimmer? It won't be effective, correct? The swimmer won't know, well, how did I do? What do I have to do differently? How can I improve my time? How can I improve my stroke? The coaches that have the best communication and give the most feedback to their swimmers are the swimmers that make the most gains.
And to add to what Maria's saying here, it's not always about telling the student where the comma should go, where the full stop should go. They've learned all of these skills. It's really helping them to discover what is wrong. That's a much deeper learning when through formatives, you help the student to discover what they need to focus on. Okay. You can watch a ton of videos on swimming, but if you really don't pick up on what you're doing different, or if the coach keeps telling you, then he becomes like a nagging person, right? Oh, I don't want to go to swimming anymore. But if you learn to discover what it is you need to focus on, the coach can help you get there. But you are the one who's, if I turn my hand this way, or if I don't kick that hard, those are the things that standard base helps our students with. Help them to discover what they need to focus on to be able to grow in whatever it is that they're doing.
So here, of course, we have traditional feedback plus the standard-based feedback that you can read there on your own, the difference of that. And of course, as Grace said, right, I guess you'll see feedback a little differently in the lower grades as you will in the upper grades, right? That feedback, the way it's given in elementary, of course, is preparing them for when they get to secondary in order for them then to be able to recognize on their own with just gentle nudges by the teacher, right?
Yes.
So it is a progression, and it's important. That's why it's so important that we're doing it all the way through this standard-based learning, that all of our teachers are on the same page so the child can truly become independent and grow. And it's that self-reflection. It's that self recognition of what's lacking so that they can, or what their challenges are to help them move forward. The next part we're going to talk a little bit is about bringing it all together.
So here you want to do this one, Maria?
No, sorry.
So here it is that we're actually looking at all your time spent on creating a new dough recipe or all your time practicing in the pool, all your formative assessments are now directly connected to your application of that skill or information to a summative assessment, to your swim meet, to the chef tasting your pizza or your guests. And you will still get feedback in your summative. It's a plan of assessment. It's not testing. It's not, we still use the word evaluation, but it's really checking on your growth. And some people might grow more than others, okay, depending on where you started. Like Miss Inara said, like if you jumped in the pool the first time and swam, then you might be doing backstroke for your summative assessment. But you're being compared to, your growth is being compared to you as well as to other people. It doesn't mean that if you did not grow as much that you are now, you failed your test. Your growth is very important when we look at standard-based models.
And that's why it's so important. And we always say what we do at ACS is we meet the student where they are. Wherever every year, teachers get students in an array of different places. And what our challenge is to meet them exactly where they are and push them ahead, to pull them up. And everyone's growth curve is going to be different, but it's their own growth curve. And that's what we're focusing on, that all of them are growing at their individual rate.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about the grading, actually. And the first slide is just a little bit of a comparison of what you probably grew up with as to what you see here at ACS. The traditional thing was you got a percentage or a letter grade, 1 grade per subject was all that really mattered. And most times kids were graded on a bell curve because we knew that very few were going to be way over at the top, very few really over at the bottom, and everybody else fell under this bell. And that's how everyone was categorized. And of course, a lot of grading went into effort, participation, being neat, being on time. Those nowadays have been moved into dispositions. They are not graded. It does not affect your academic, but it is under the dispositions grade where you can see for yourself as a student, oh, I didn't get a 4 out of 4, for being on time or curious or whatever. And I do know that sometimes we think that if they're not getting a grade, they're not going to improve. But it's also kind of like teaching them self-responsibility. Those are talents that you need to develop to also boost your academic. But they're not, your academic is not based on that. In standards-based, we are still seeing percentages. There are still letter grades. There are more anecdotal comments, okay? And there are different levels of comments or percentages or dispositions that you will also see coming up with different students. Elementary and secondary are a little bit different in what they present as standards-based. In elementary, grades are based only on the achievement of the standard. You either met it, you're almost there, you are not there. That's what it looks like. There are multiple opportunities always to demonstrate mastery throughout the year. In high school, it's a little bit different. Yes, we are standard-based learning, but it's based on the total points that you accumulate throughout the semester. It does have a percentage attached to it. Formatives do not have a grade attached to them to give you the chance to practice and re-practice and really grow in your formatives before you take your summative. They reflect the performance against a set of standards. As in elementary, there are also many opportunities to demonstrate your understanding through assessment. And assessment is not always sit down, pen and paper test. Assessment can be participation in class, can be a project, can be working collaborative, working in a group, collaborating on a theme, which is where the world is going. And that's why we have a lot of collaboration among students in secondary and in elementary.
So speaking of multiple opportunities to demonstrate mastery, what does that look like in elementary and secondary? So in elementary, of course, students are assessed multiple times throughout the year, like we said, and we're always giving them opportunities to achieve that mastery. As Ms. Grace said, also in elementary, formatives don't count towards the final summative grade that's reported on the report card. Even though the teachers put it into the grade book, into PowerSchool, the formative assessments, it's not pulled. The formatives aren't averaged with the summative for the final grade. It's only the summative that is the final grade. Because if we think back to the swim meet that Ms. Grace mentioned before, the final competition, unfortunately, isn't based on all the great practices you did. That they're not going to look at the videos to see, okay, well, so you did really good in your practice. You came in third here, but okay, we'll let you be second because you did great in your practices. That's not what happens in real life. But in school, we do look at all the formatives. And like we said, it guides our instruction. If we see they're not doing well, we help them, we push them up before the summative. If we feel that the summative is not truly showing that what we know they have mastered, because in the formatives, they showed that they were mastering, we might make them retake it. We might have a conversation with the student or the parents and decide, because of our professional judgment, that this summative did not show mastery. So we're going to use the last formative where they already showed mastery. And maybe they, like Grace was saying, maybe they were having an off day, but we give them several opportunities to show that. In secondary, once again, students have the opportunity to reassess, but it's very important for you to know that they have to have shown that they were prepared for the summative, that they did all the formatives, that they tried, that they put their effort into analyzing their weaknesses, requesting time for the teacher to help them, and then requesting for a reassessment. So the teachers have a checklist of things that they're looking for to see that a student did independently, like Grace said, without that being nagged. Remember, we talked about how we scaffold up to high school, and we want them to be independent learners. So they have to show that they are doing the formatives, even though it's not graded, so that we know that they've tried everything, that they've put in all the time and effort into trying the formatives. That they might not be understanding, but they are putting in their effort, and the teacher will meet with them and help them, then give them the reassessment of the summative. And this could look like maybe like it says here, resubmission of the final draft after feedback, test corrections. That's something typical of traditional tests. Maybe teacher chunking assessment, so that that could help the student, or taking the whole assessment over. So there's different ways that it happens in elementary and secondary, but there's always multiple opportunities for it to happen.
So now we want to look about, just tie all these pieces together about standard-based learning a little bit and go over some of the points that we just talked about. Standard-based learning. There are learning targets. Those are our standards. All the lesson planning and instruction are aligned to those standards, therefore making it very flexible for the teacher to be able to change up their lesson plans according to the group they have or the individual. We're looking down the road at where we want to get to. So all of the little benchmarks on the way, we can meet them in very different ways. It's very flexible. Formative assessments are used so students and teachers can adjust along the way as they go. And as Maria was saying, this is such an important part of the whole standard-based learning. It is not, you don't get a consequence for being good or bad at a formative assessment. It prepares you, you get feedback constantly to be able to prepare for the big swim meet. There are many opportunities to demonstrate mastery. Exactly that. Even if your formative was an assessment that you didn't do well on, you can retake it. There's no pressure on you because you got a bad grade or a good grade. No, you retake it until that formative is what you want, until you learn that skill before you get to the summative. Even when you get to the summative, all that feedback has helped you. It has helped you grow. Now you can take that skill and apply it to your summative. And that's what's important. You've gotten all that feedback. And even with the summative, you will still get feedback. If you've done all your formatives, if you've shown that you have received that feedback, you focused on what you needed to improve, then you get a retake on your summative. No? And a lot of times the retakes happen on those little pieces before you actually get to the final draft of your paper, to the final presentation of your of whatever your project was about. And so you are well prepared before you get to the summative.
So our final quote is from Aubrey Brake Graham. And I think it just encapsulates everything that we've been talking about. Sometimes it's the journey that teaches you a lot about your destination. And really that's what standard-based learning is all about. It's what you've done to get to where you are. You know, whether it was difficult, whether it was easy, whether you put a lot of effort into it, whether you didn't put so much effort into it, but at the end, that's what really teaches you, right? About why you are where you are. And that's our focus on making our students more conscious and aware of how to independently each step of the way to grow and to continue to try and put that effort into meeting the standard. And they might not always meet the standard, right? Our goal in elementary and secondary, in elementary, of course, we grade 1 through 4, and our goal isn't everybody to have a 4, and they're not going to, right? Meeting the standard is a 3. And that's where we are trying to get, but not everybody gets to a 3, and that's okay, but they are moving in the right direction towards meeting the standard. And that's what's the most important, and that they feel and that they know what they've done to improve.
Yes, and to add to what Maria is saying, it's about learning the skills, for later on in life, whether that is high school, university, job ethics. It's so much more than just that grade. It's that constant focus on wanting to improve and to grow.
I think the word that maybe we could say, Grace, what we're really trying for our kids is to learn perseverance.
Yes.
Right? I mean, even if it's hard, even if I didn't do well, I'm just going to keep trying. And I know that I might not have it yet, but I'm going to get there. So we'd like to open up now for a little Q&A. If anyone has a question, we'll ask that you just unmute yourself, or you can write it in the chat, and we're going to ask Annie to help us monitor the chat if anything comes up. Any questions? And just to remind you, before we start the question time, that we try to be respectful to one another, and we don't mention any particular names of students or teachers. And if there's anything that needs further discussion about, Ms. Grace and I are more than happy to call you individually and set up a meeting.
We have a hand raised for Alejandra.
Ale, hi.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. Can I speak in Spanish?
Yes.
Of course.
Does it work? Okay. Gracias por la presentación, realmente súper didáctica. Por fin entiendo muy bien cómo se evalúa y qué significa cada una de ellas. Y sí tengo algunas preguntas que me surgen. Primero, en esto del formative y del summative, si alguien está haciendo muy bien en el formative, pero por alguna razón le va mal cuando está en la competencia, como decías, Grace, lo lanzas a la piscina y tiene que estar en la competencia, a veces me da la impresión de que si lo ha hecho muy bien mientras practicaba, pero le va mal en la competencia, no sé si un retake es lo mejor para ayudarlo a alcanzar el objetivo, el estándar, porque tal vez pueden haber otro tipo de skills que esta persona no tenga, ¿no? Que este estudiante no tenga y que tenga que aprender, por ejemplo, a controlar los nervios o algo así, ¿no? Entonces, a veces sí, capaz es que fue un mal día y hace retake y le va a ir bien, pero si sistemáticamente lo hace bien en el formative, pero no le va bien en el summative, tal vez otro tipo de habilidades más blandas sean la que necesite desarrollar esta persona. Y si el colegio puede notar este tipo de situaciones y ayudar a esta persona a tener estas otras habilidades, por ejemplo, controlar los nervios o qué sé yo, para poder hacerlo mejor el día de la competencia. Esa es una pregunta. Otra pregunta es, si realmente es bueno que tengan tantas oportunidades para ser reevaluados o para tomar un retake, porque sí, la educación está evolucionando mucho y no sé si cuando llegan a la universidad el retake sigue siendo una opción o no, porque capaz los acostumbramos mucho a los retakes, pero en la vida real no pasa esto y van a estar y no van a estar bien preparados. Esa era la segunda pregunta. La tercera, perdón, tengo varias y te las voy a soltar todas de una, es que no sé si sigue funcionando así o no, pero yo sabía, bueno, hace mucho tiempo que no hablo con los chicos sobre eso, pero por ejemplo, que para tomar un retake, un ejemplo, no, porque no recuerdo bien la cifra, pero por ejemplo, lo podían tomar los chicos que tenían entre 3 y 3.9, por decirte, ¿no? Pero si alguien había tenido más de 3.9 en el summative, ya no podía tomar un retake, o sea, no tenía la oportunidad de mejorar su grade. Y esto a veces me parece injusto porque, no sé, alguien que tenía 3.7 puede acabar con un grade mayor que alguien que tenía un grade más alto en la primera evaluación, pero no se le da la oportunidad de tomar un retake, ¿no? Entonces, esa era la tercera pregunta. Y la cuarta, yo no sé, es más para elementary, pero no sé si los chicos están realmente conscientes, o sea, si realmente ustedes notan que ellos saben y tienen conciencia de cuál es el estándar que tienen que alcanzar.
Okay.
Ahora sí,
Yes,
ahí
what-
para. Perdón.
Me voy a,
I'll start because I kind of feel like the first three I can probably get with one shot. Is
okay.
it okay if I speak in English? Yes?
It's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Okay. So let me see if I remember, okay? So the first one was on the amount of times they can actually do it, right? So yes, kids can redo their summatives. It's based on their formatives and if they've done all the formatives. I think that the number of retakes is limited on a summative. The number of retakes on that summative is limited depending on the department and depending on the assignment. For example, if they gave like over 2 weeks a draft of an English paper, that means that over the 2 weeks, they were constantly checking on the drafts, on the different parts of speech. They were giving feedback. And so when the summative comes, it's literally turning in your paper because you've gotten so much feedback during that time on that kind of assessment that there probably is not a retake to that summative because you've been preparing to turn in the final paper, no, over 2 weeks. So something like that would not have a retake because your work has been controlled and you've gotten feedback over 2 weeks on every little piece that you put together. No? Now, the number of retakes, like I said, is limited according to the department and according to the assignment that you got. That some kids, let's say over a 4, have a 3.9, and you have to have, you don't get a retake if you're a 3.9. There's another thing behind that. It's like, we want to teach our kids to be good students, but it's not a competition to get that 4.0 GPA all the time. And I think what usually happens is the teacher also has to judge. You know, there are kids that do need to get these retakes, and there are other kids that just freak out and get desperate if they're not getting a 4.0. And we also don't want to encourage that, right? And so you have to know your kid psychologically, social, emotional. And we go to Carolina and Annie a lot when it comes to certain kids who are perfectionists. We don't want to say that we want to take away their goal of being a perfectionist, but we also know that in the real world, being a perfectionist can stress you out, give you heart attack, high blood pressure, everything. So we want to work with the whole child. And some kids need things different to what other kids need. And so we try and sort that out before we say, oh, but I got a 3.9, I needed 1 more point to get a 4.0, and I can't do a retake. And a lot of times the retakes are associated with a smaller percentage. So if you do the retake, if you qualify, I'll talk about that in a little bit. If you qualify to do a retake, then you might be able to get only 80% of the grade. No, depending on the situation, depending on the assignment. So and depending on the department and what they're doing. Like if I imagine if I give a project and I'm on them for 2 weeks, did you do this part? Did you do that part? Did you take into account this feedback, that feedback? Then, and somebody really bombs the final presentation, I might say, okay, you did really well to here, redo your presentation, or you were nervous, come back and present to us. Which brings me to the other point of how they give summatives. If a kid doesn't do well on a summative in secondary, they have to first present something, each teacher is different, why they should get a retake. So they're showing the teacher that they're ready for the retake. And then they need to meet with the teacher. And most times, especially in high school, we sit with them and we say, okay, what happened? I was nervous, Miss. So did you understand what the final summative was? Yes. Talk to me about it. And so just that oral information one-on-one from your student helps you put a different perspective on the summative that they're going to retake. Whether it's written, whether they come to you and they give you an oral retake, or they give another presentation. It's really on an individual basis that the teacher sort of meets with the student. Now we do have a handful of students, they are teenagers who will purposely, every summative, bomb the summative and say, Mr. or Miss, I want to retake, right? Or they just don't turn up for the summative. And then they say, well, I did all my formats, so I want to retake. And so those are other situations that we also have to take into account when we do these retakes on formatives and summatives. Each kid is so different and each assignment is so different.
And if I can just mention about, students that have test anxiety, that's a real thing. And we know that for some students, it is paralyzing almost to the point, that they really can't perform. And with those students, yes, Carolina and Annie do work with. And if you have noticed that in your child and maybe the school hasn't yet noticed that, I would encourage you to reach out to Annie or Carolina so they can gather more information about the situation and work individually with your child. Definitely, we work with those children, Ale. So that's something that we are very conscious of, and we know it's real. And then your point about, in real life, excuse me, there aren't a lot of retakes. I'd also, say in real life, there aren't a lot of moments where you have to, 20 people have to sit down and take a test in 45 minutes. And it depends on your grade. I mean, there's lots of things in real life that aren't similar to what happens in school. Now more and more universities aren't giving final exams. They're asking for collaborative projects. They're asking for students to decide what they would like to write a thesis paper on. They aren't asking for memorizing facts. I mean, universities are also wanting to see learning in a different way. The standard-based learning isn't only happening at private elite schools, elementary and secondary schools. It's a movement that's happening everywhere. And universities are also doing the same thing. And they're wanting to produce graduates that have more collaboration, that have more, that they're more autosufficient, and that they know what their challenges are, what their weaknesses and their strengths are, so that they're better prepared to go into the workplace. The workplace is filtering the information into colleges. Your 4.0 students that are coming out of colleges aren't doing well in the workforce. They can't work on a team. They can't accept feedback from their bosses. They only are like tunnel vision of getting the project done. And we don't want individual workers at the workplace. We want collaborative, creative workers. And so that from the workplace trickled down to the university, has come into the schools. So we're kind of all, working together to produce not students or individuals that come out in a box, right? It is a different kind of way of thinking than the way we went to elementary, high school, and college, right? We went to school very differently. And we probably maybe worked or are working in places that might be more traditional. But the workforce is changing. I mean, we just know that from COVID, right? And a lot of workplaces are still, now that COVID is, coming to an end, have realized that, maybe they don't need everybody in the office 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So things are changing all around.
And, I'm going to add a little bit to what Maria is saying. We still have existing APs and SATs and ACTs, and that is more like a traditional format. We cannot, in this transition of where education is evolving or what it's going to eventually evolve into, we still need to keep kids accountable for those exams. And so in secondary, that's why we do this balancing act. Kids are being taught the standards-based learning, and however, their grading is still in percentages and GPAs, which is what the university is still accepting. And it's going to take a while. We're living through this evolution, and then COVID has brought this other layer on top, which is making universities open their eyes. Also, the College Board is beginning to open their eyes as to what the reality of the world is. And we don't know for sure what next year is going to look like. We can only focus on what they want us to do this year. And so it's blending these cultures together to make sure that our students leaving the final goal, applying to university, that they're successful no matter what that scene looks like.
Exactly. Andrea, you had your hand up. Thanks for waiting.
Hi, I want to say thank you. This is all new to me, so I'm still trying to understand it, I guess. But I was a little worried, more than a question, is I've been seeing maybe 2 summatives, 3 summatives a quarter for the children. And when we were in high school, we would have percentage weighted grades on homeworks and on attendance and on tests, midterms. So each one had a percentage, 20%, 10%, 5%, whatever it was. So if a child didn't test well, or they wouldn't do that good in testing, where here it would be the summatives, they would still be able to get the other percentage where it was the homeworks and the attendance and midterms and everything else that was weighted. So their grades could go up if they didn't do so well on the testing. Now here I've been seeing that if they have 2 or 3 summatives a quarter, they don't have much wiggle room if they do get a bad grade and they don't get to do a retake. I was just worried this or asking how many summatives should we have in order for them to have wiggle room in order to, if they do bad on one of the subjects or tests.
Well, the thing here is with standard-based is it's really separating the academic from the dispositions, one.
From the
No?
non-academic, right?
So the dispositions of being on time, showing effort, being curious in the lab, all of those are dispositions. Those are habits of behavior. The pure academics is what actually gets a grade. So it's really important as a parent to check also the dispositions. The academics are what standard-based looks at, and there is no clear rule as to how many summatives are given. Some teachers love the participation, the formatives, making sure their kids know, and they might give 1 summative until midterm. It might have been a project or a paper that they wrote and they learned skills on, and there was the end product was the summative. So there is no hard and fast rule as to how many summatives are given. It's a whole different look at academics. And I understand, like, coming from the older version of education, you're saying, how can they keep their grades up? And really and truly, it's forcing the kids to be more responsible on their formatives, their homework, so to say, or being present in class, whether virtually or on campus, and paying attention. All those dispositions are put aside because what we're looking at is that academic formation. And it might lead up to 2 summatives, it might lead up to 1 summative. It might lead up to 1 AP exam in the year. And that's your grade. That's what you got on APs. So it's a different look at the evolution of education. I don't know if that answers your question, Andrea.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, if I can just say, it's so important, right, for students, like you said, to do all the summatives, and the teachers provide, formatives. And that's why the teachers provide so many formative before the summative, so that, so the teacher and the student clearly know they're going into the summative prepared, because they've done lots of formative and they've got lots of chances to practice before they go into the summative. And then again, right, is the retake. If they don't do too well, yes, they don't have that much wiggle room, but there's many more opportunities to reassess. Like Grace said, every teacher, every department's protocol is a little different for reassessment, but they all have the opportunity to reassess as long as they met certain criteria during the formative. So that's important, to sit down with your child and talk about that criteria for reassessment, because it's not just, oh, I bombed it, I want to reassess. It's not that way. Because like Ale was saying, that's not real life, right? You'll get more opportunities, but you have to put in the time and effort in order to be given the opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I see Cannon has her hand up.
Yes, Grace, thank you very much. And I just want to give some examples to Andrea related with her question. Because, my son is in high school, there are really good attempts to help the kids to make their grades better. For example, yes, homeworks are formative, but some teachers are doing some homeworks as summative, very small percentage to help them, because the homeworks are being made at home and they are open their books, maybe they are making the homework with his friends or her friends, and the teacher is counting them as summative in some classes. And on the other hand, some of the teachers are giving some formatives, and if the kid is completing formatives on time and without missing, they are giving extra credits to the kids during the summatives. And also, there are some small games, Kahoots or similar things. They are giving some extra credits for the first 3, for the first 5, or they are making pre-summatives very small. 3, for example, it's great. It's great is over 3, but it is also aiming to see if kids know something before the topic. If they know something, those kids are also have some extra credits. For that reason, you don't need to think that only summative is bringing the grades to the power school, okay, or to the report. Also, there are some small social activities giving the kids, interest, fun, and at the same time, a little bit extra summative percentage to support their summative. For that reason, in high school, really, I'm so happy with every teachers in high school. They are really trying to see the kids in that way, to support them, to give some extra if they need, or if they are lower than 90, they are giving retest opportunity or corrections are so useful because they're asking, hey, you, why did you do this mistake? Please tell me why you chose this item. And how did you understand it is not correct later? And please tell me why the correct answer was correct, but you didn't choose it. These kind of correction opportunities also make our kids to prepare to write essays. For that reason, don't worry, okay? It is not only the testing grades. Your kid, if following everything in a very careful way, there are lots of opportunity to make some extra points. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Canon. You should be our spokesperson. Dan.
Yes, thank you so
Dan
much.
has his hand up.
Dan, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Maria and Grace, for the presentation and this evolution in teaching and learning. My question is about what this means for teachers and how they're adapting to these changes. It seems like a lot more work, and I guess is it fair to expect the traditional this to be effective with the traditional class size of 25 kids, or is that too difficult for teachers to do this?
Well, I think with the evolution of anything, especially in education, the teachers are the first ones we work with. And this has been coming for many years. It's not something that we've just started. We've been bringing it in little by little, focusing on different things every year. So let's say, elementary started with a standard-based grading, okay? And they do standard-based grading now for the last, 3 or 4 years.
7.
7 years? Is it that much? Okay, COVID caught me there, okay? And so I lost track of time with COVID. So, and for secondary, we've come up with the standard-based learning, the standard-based everything, except the grading part. We grade towards the standards, but we report in percentages. And so we're always trying to bridge that gap to university and what's expected outside. And as they change at the top, we will also begin to bring that into secondary. I'm not saying that it's easy for any of us, but luckily for us, we don't teach the way Socrates did, right? And so we have to evolve, and we deal with the things little bit. We hope that we deal with it slowly enough for teachers to be able to adapt, but fast enough not to be left behind.
Right. And just the way that teachers expect what they expect of their students and what they do with their classrooms, that they meet them where they are and they differentiate and they use data to guide their instruction. we do the same as administration with our teachers. We didn't just push them into the deep end and say, you
No.
know, I hope you get
Swim.
it, right? I mean, we did a lot of PD beforehand, right? We did a lot of PD, professional development for our teachers, right? We brought experts in on the subject. We gave release time to teachers to really understand. We gave them money to take classes. We put in a lot of our, resources into supporting the teachers so they were prepared to do that. And we still do, right? We give them time to meet as groups, to have professional learning communities in order to analyze the data of the students so that they can decide how they are going to move forward and guide their instruction in whatever subject they teach, or as an elementary in all the subjects. Hence the reason why, because of the 20 to 25 student classrooms that we have in elementary, we do have that early release on Wednesdays, and that's exactly what they do. It's not that we're all sitting in the courtyard having a nice lunch in the sun. No, we do that for 30 minutes, but then we all go into our PLC groups and we look and we plan as to what we're seeing happening in our classrooms. Where is the student? What can they do? And we also use the time for more professional development for our teachers.
And, we look a lot at the data that we're getting from kids. We look at the MAP data. For example, there's always a slump when you come back from summer in your MAP data. Even in that data, and the kids being online for 2 years, we found that our middle school kids all met their growth goals in language, which was fantastic. So that also gives you a little more like, I can do this, encourages you along the way. And we do a lot of data analysis, like Maria says, whether it's looking at AP results together as a high school, because you can't say AP Environmental Science has nothing to do with the English that the kids are learning. We look at everything. We also look a little bit at their PSAT data, which has been shaky for the last 2 or 3 years because of COVID. And then there are teachers that will look at the data of a student in their classroom. So I'm looking at student X, and we're looking at student X in all their classes. That's another kind of data. What are we seeing about this grade level? Because sometimes even there are characteristics that belong to a grade level. The group of the grade has their own sort of like personality, no? And so, or you can break them up.
Sorry to interrupt you, but just that brings to mind also how it's important that we have these professional learning communities, because we have like interdepartmental meetings as well.
Yes,
so
we do.
The Spanish teacher and the art teacher and the physical education teacher meet with the math teacher and the science teacher, because they're all seeing a child in different, from a different perspective, but there might be something in common that they're all seeing and that they're worried about, or that they're all seeing and they're really so excited that they're seeing, or they brainstorm, how can we help this student in this area? So like the whole child just has so many different snapshots of how they're performing during the day and in different areas. And it is work. I mean, really, teaching is hard work, because each individual student is so delicate and so important. And our teachers put in so much time and energy into each one of them. They care for them so much and they want them to succeed. And so we take a lot of time with each and every one of them.
And even adding to that is that there's something called a student feedback form. I mean, it's a completely different thing. It doesn't have to do with your SAT or your MAP data or your grades. It's really give me feedback on the entire child. And so when we send out a student feedback form on somebody that a teacher says, I'm worried, then we get feedback on that form about their social emotional, their dispositions. And then that at once raises a red flag to the counselors and principals. We need to meet with the parents. Something else is affecting their academics. So like Maria says, it's the whole child that we're looking at. And back to your question, Dan, about how much work that is for teachers. It's not the teacher, it's the community of educators that work together. And you know, in an office, not everybody's going to be on board with everything. No. And sometimes that one person's voice is louder than everyone else. But I have to say that teachers on the whole, they look at the whole child. And that's what brings us back always to the same point, that that's what we're here for.
Yeah, and I think we have a really strong support system for our teachers in order for them to be able to do this hard work. We have
Yes.
a strong administrative team, you know, counseling team. We have a learning lab team with you know, learning support teachers, with English as a second language teachers, IEP coaches. So for students that are having different difficulties. So it really does take a village, and I think our village is pretty tight. And at least that's what we are trying to attain to.
Thanks. That sounds great. I mean, it seems like everyone is more or less on the same page, the teachers that we've had. And just to ask the individualized attention that this requires, we can still do this with the 20 to 25 class sizes, or the standard-based learning doesn't carry like
Yes.
the efficiencies. It's still possible with those class sizes to be
It's still-
effective. Yeah.
It
It's
is.
still
It is.
possible.
Okay.
But max, that's why we have that hard cap of 25. We don't want to go over that. Because then it's still doable, but right, it just becomes much more time consuming is what would happen for the teacher.
Right. Just like timely feedback is hard when you have to read 25 essays. Yeah, I can imagine.
So there's a question from Rocio that says, if we could move these meetings to 7 at night. 7 at night would be a little bit, I mean, we can discuss it, but you know, just remind your parents that this recording will go into the Cougar Hub. Maria puts it on elementary news and I will have it on secondary news so that they can revisit anytime they want. They can look at the recording and send us questions. I'm always open to anyone's questions.
And we have in the past, we used to alternate when we first started parent coffee hours. We would, 1 month we would do it in the morning, 1 month at night, 1 month in the morning. But our data showed that not any more people came at night. Unfortunately, it's usually the same parents that come, whether or not we have it in the morning or at night. You can see we have, I don't know, I'm not seeing the number right now of how many people are here, 14.
14 with us included.
And we have to say, right, Grace, this is kind of a large crowd. Usually we don't have more than 10. We're definitely open to go back and trying in the evening. But in the past, we haven't seen it make a big difference of how many people show up.
Well, if there are no more questions, I'm checking the chat right now. Thank you, Canon. I'd like to thank you
Sorry.
all for coming.
Sorry, Grace, I'm interrupting. There was one question that we skipped. It's up there of Mr. David Montesinos. And it
Okay.
says, buenos días, muchas gracias por las presentaciones. Todo vivido estos 2 años, los niños de primaria en especial deben tener mayor prioridad en cuanto a lectura y escritura en inglés. ¿Qué se está haciendo en este tema?
Yes, I'll answer in Spanish, I think, if that's all right, Grace. David, totalmente de acuerdo. Estamos enfocándonos en lectura, en escritura. Como muchos saben, o tal vez algunos no, nosotros tenemos, nosotros los llamamos entrenadores de literatura, literacy coaches, que trabajan directamente con las profesoras. Hay una para los más pequeños en primaria y hay otra que hace los más grandes de primaria y middle school. Y ellas, con la ayuda de una consultora externa que hemos contratado este año, están enfocándose plenamente para ver dónde estamos después de la pandemia, después de lo virtual y en qué áreas tenemos que enfocarnos para subir la área de lectura y escritura. Entonces, sí estamos trabajando mucho con las profesoras para enfocarnos en esas áreas. Gracias, David. Well, I want to thank you very much. We went over the hour, but I think it was worthwhile. We had a lot of participation and questions that we hope we answered. And like Grace said, if anybody has anything else that they want to bring up or they think about it, don't hesitate to email either one of us, and we can clarify anything or help you with any concerns that you may be having. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Have a great day and a safe carnival vacation.
Bye. See you next month.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a nice
Bye.
holiday.